Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. You have saved my life, really, my Write the Poem crew and your homework requests. So for those of you who don't know, what we normally do is meet once a month, and Chris and I do a writing workshop. But what we decided to do, probably because you guys were like, oh, what should we do? I felt inspired by you to meet every week, and we started setting homework, and it's been brilliant actually, because for me, I'm not great at using form. I've always been a bit dismissive and said it's too hard, it's too restrictive, it stops me from writing what I want to write, which is rubbish actually. It's just because I was lazy, I reckon. And so doing this as homework has really helped me see how form can help you tell the story in the right way, actually. So what I've been staggered by over the weeks during lockdown has been the quality, really, of writing. So we'll have a matter of days to produce a bit of writing, and then I come away astounded at the stuff that you're sharing. So we all decided it would be really cool to get together and spend a little bit more time going over it. So I think what I'll do, if that's all right with you, is just call a name, and then the plan is that we will say what the process of writing the poem was, as well as sharing the poem, if that makes sense. Who shall I pick on to go first? Margaret, would you mind going first?
Okay, well, I tackled the Fibonacci. Well, we'd spent a couple of sessions, one some time ago and one more recently, looking at Fibonacci sequences. And the Fibonacci sequence is a very formal sequence. It's a mathematical sequence. It goes 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, whatever you always add the previous number to it, and it can go on forever. And we read some poems, I think, some time ago, and you could use it in different ways as a sequence, really. And I decided to use it counting words. So the first line would have 1 word, the second line would have 2 words, the third line would have 3, fourth line would have 5, etc., etc. So I decided to do that. And we had a theme, and the theme was, the theme for this Fibonacci session that we had was life-changing moment. And that was quite interesting, actually, that it coincided with a number of things that were going on for me. I mean, including the Fibonacci thing, but, and I found putting these things together very liberating. I found the formality and the rigid formality of the Fibonacci sequence allowed me, I had to think of a life-changing moment. And so I thought of the most recent life-changing moment in my life, truly life-changing, which was actually 10 years ago, which is still what my life's been like for the last 10 years. But it was life-changing. And of course, it was when my partner of 37 years died. And so I thought, fine, okay, let's do that. And I've been thinking of it, and I think I came to that anyway, because I've been thinking, just before we'd done that Fibonacci workshop, I'd been having a conversation with my granddaughter, and she'd been telling me how her hamster had died, and she'd cremated it in the garden. And we talked about the burning of the hamster, and I'd been trying, and it connected with me with this word cremated. And I was thinking about how, because we'd laughed about it, how you can talk and laugh about the cremating of a hamster, even though it's a dearly loved pet, but we don't talk about the cremation and the burning. Well, we talk about cremation, but we don't talk about the burning of our loved ones. It's an actual, we burn if we cremate them, we burn their bodies. And I wanted to write about that. And I also was thinking about how when you life-changing moments are quite hard to write about without getting sensational or sentimental or cliched or banal, And I found that the rigid formula of the Fibonacci curtailed me in that way and allowed me to talk about the burning of the bodies and this life-changing moment, because the formality of Fibonacci was kind of like a ritual, which is of course what funerals and cremations are. And my poem starts off at the notion of ritual. So it goes: needing the ritual, not the burning, a wreath of white lilies laid on a wooden box heavy with silence. We listened to kind words spoken by someone who didn't know you. Purple velvet curtains swish and the wooden box slides to the other side where the ritual ends and the burning begins. Outside, the sun is shining, the colours so bright and harsh, making our eyes water as we talk, but do not listen, trying to fill the space in the air that was once filled by you. I must return to the singular, turn my back on the space that slept beside me, return to the person I used to be, but put aside for the sake of you and me. The tight circle of love that once held us is unsprung and become a spiral of endless possibility, an endless road. Because of course, the Fibonacci sequence is the mathematical basis of the spiral as well. So that was it.
The form really helped it, because you're right,
yeah.
It allows you to speak freely.
Yes, and it pulled together. Yes.
Thanks, Margaret. That was lovely. Laura, my lovely Laura, would you like to share yours?
Yes, I'll do that. I did a poem actually that we started in December at the workshop in Nottingham. And at that one, Chris brought out a mix of photos from magazines. We picked 3. I picked a photo of a woman with a shopping cart, one of people with bodies of fingerprints high-fiving, and a photo of an Egyptian pharaoh or godlike figure. And then Chris asked us to write a 6-line poem for each of these photos. After that, step 2 was, excuse me, to take the first pair of each of those 3 poems and make them into one, and then the second pair of each, make them into another, and the third pair of each, and make them into another poem. And then I think that's all we had time for from my notes. And I looked at it and I thought, well, I'm not sure this is really going anywhere, I don't know. But I had typed it up, and then later I looked at it again and thought that I liked some of the lines, but I could only really incorporate the second and third photos together. They, worked. The first I discarded. It was sort of amusing, and I liked actually as a whole. This is before putting the pairs together. That one fit together sort of nicely. But then the more serious poem, I started to really like some of these lines, and I was moving them around, adding lines, cutting lines, and then I think it was a while later I looked at it again, and I thought it really needed something, and I really sort of just had this vision of what wasn't in there that needed to go. And this is not a poem that has a strict form. Anyway, so so it was sort of the two parts. There was sort of the godlike thing going on, and then there was this no, I'm getting. There was a more abstract, I know God sounds abstract already, but there was another part that was really abstract. This is an abstract poem. Expressionist. Anyway, so this all finally came together, and I really revised it, you know, and I have now the up-to-date version. So yeah, so I reworked this a number of times, and anyway, so it became Blue Hair Touching God is the name of the poem. And yes, and I was really pleased that the other piece we did that time, Anne had us do a similar sort of mix of things and mix them together, and that's, I liked that one too. Anyway, that ended up being very good. So, when my husband stands, blue hair touching God, aims the whalebone straight through me, then lifts his hands. I recognize their movement from long ago, from back somewhere before I was born. Some sort of sign it was, from when the swirling code was just a greeting. His swaying body confuses. I feel for his pulse. Say, stick out your tongue. Down that red gangplank march the migrants of the world. Our own family. Early man Africans. Bearing straight crossers. Colonizing Europeans, former colonies' peoples, today's Latin Americans, war-torn Balkans, Armenians, Syrians, Holocaust fleers, fighting persecutors, giving birth, headless, deformed, crying, bleeding. His pulse grows weak. No, I shout. Go back inside. He will protect you. But I know they must come. And God waits, small, at the end of their trail. Size isn't everything. Not to mention, we can't see a thing out here. Thank you.
Boom. My head is
That was right. That was awesome.
my head is exploding, Laura, because you started somewhere and I thought I knew where you were going.
Yeah.
And then you took me into like the belly of the world. And I'm like, email me the poem. There's so much in that. I love the fact that I know a lot of times we'll do exercises in a workshop and then we'll write a poem and that's it. So I love the fact you've actually gone back and worked on it and worked on it and worked on it. And I feel like it's a real performance piece as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
John, where has John disappeared to?
Yes, so I've chosen a piece of the homework to do. One I've chosen, as I think, is because it was quite an interesting process for me in arriving at the final homework. But I'm doing a bit of a Margaret in that I'm not reading the homework as such, although all the homework is in what I'm going to read, if that isn't too confusing a concept. We were asked for homework to write haiku, a form I had vaguely dabbled with once and decided it was feckin' awful and I didn't want anything to do with it ever again. But never one to shirk a challenge. I thought, right, what I'd really like to do is write a traditional Japanese haiku, a proper Japanese, because I'm quite a Japanophile, or whatever the correct word is. So I then researched that and found out you couldn't, because their idea of syllables didn't really match our 575, which is the English version typically, and they write diagonally rather than horizontally, and all sorts of other issues. So I thought, oh, I'm going to end up writing a really plastic haiku here, because I wanted to write something about nature, and I wanted to do, in theory, what they do, which is somehow be transformative. And so, being stuck, I just let my head mull on things for a while, which is often a good way of coming to a solution eventually. And I remembered before too long that I'd written a poem whilst watching a film about the artist Andrew Goldsworthy. I was really pleased when I came to read it in the session that some people had actually heard of Andrew Goldsworthy, because usually when I'm picking really obscure people to write about, everyone looks at me blankly like I'm talking in some complete foreign language, or I've just landed from some alien planet. So that was really cool. So Andrew Goldsworthy does art in nature. Some of it's very temporary, and some of it's quite fixed and permanent, as well as doing things in and around museums for commissions and such. I fell in love with, I'm a big art fan anyway, and I fell in love with what he did and his aesthetic and his whole thing. And the picture behind me is an Andrew Goldsworthy. I thought, hang on, Andrew Goldsworthy, that was all about nature. I'd watched this film called Leaning into the Wind that was briefly on Film 4. And I knew as soon as I started watching it, I'm going to have to write about this. So I kept stopping it and writing the poems as I went through. And when I thought back on it, I thought, I'm sure that's full of nature's type things that would fit a haiku. So that was my next part of the exercise, was to go back to that poem and pick out some potential haiku candidates. I ended up picking out 12, and of which 11 became haiku, which I subsequently read at the homework session. But the poem itself is not much bigger, but it's slightly bigger. But I enjoyed the process of writing the haiku, and I kept to the 575 syllables. And I really enjoyed the kind of discipline and the focus that having to write 3 concise lines gives you. And decided that the finished haiku was better content on the whole than what I originally had in the poem. So I went back to the original poem and inserted all the haiku. So that's what I'm going to read for you now, the whole poem. And anyone who gets bored can play Spot the Haiku, and you are looking for 11 of them. And this is called Leaning into the Wind. Andrew Goldsworthy narrates a poem around his art. Torso in a hedge, held spidery to the dark sky. Night's crucifixion. Wet, yellow leaves fixed to rock's cold, slab, hard surface. Dark days, painted gold. Red gorse in my mouth, spat floating to open air, spring's blessing of snow. The shallowest grave, a line between a wall that I can walk along, a furrow in stone that holds the length of a life, a prison of flesh, grown from the land and made new, a ghost of stone dust, granite garden of my will, I wave to the wind, a white casket, fleshed from stone ground, unlidded, open, a hymn to the sky, my fiery image pressed in earth on a hilltop rock, a wound to the rain, but digging into the earth itself is a vein too far. Here in a forest, a stone hole to the heart rests amongst family, standing guard for eternity. Shake the soul from branches, holding in sunlight, brush the air with dust, a silver sarcophagus in nighttime drips light to poppy gloved hands red in the petal spilled river. I lose the very skin of me. A flotilla of leaves sail a damned wall that snakes the earth. Learning to fall is important. I fall a lot, held balanced, leaning in the wind's tension, struggle, life's hard truth exposed. Good work is a moment of clarity when everything makes sense, buffering the storm of living as a kite, held in my frailty, windblown, alive. Thank you.
Thanks, John. We're your tribe, John. Of course we've heard of John, of Andrew Galsworthy. You're just mixing in the wrong circles, my lovely. Again, there's so much in it. There's so much packed into it. And I love the fact that you've reduced it down to a haiku or several and then expanded it out again. Joe, very echoey. I'm going to mute all. So my lovely Joe, and not my lovely Joe, I say my lovely Joe because I've got a lovely Joe. Joe is fairly new to us, and she's amazing. I'm just so happy that she's fallen into the Write the Poem hole. Joe, what are you going to give us?
Oh,
Hey,
that's nice. Okay, so I have chosen to do a poem that I wrote in response to a self-portrait prompt, which was I can tell you about it, just bear with me. Self-portraits. There we go. Okay, so it was on the 13th of May, and it was in the 2-hour workshop, and in the second half of the workshop we did a self-portrait exercise, and the exercise went as followed. We had to draw a 1-minute self-portrait, so a stick person or similar, and then we looked at some self-portrait poems, and I can tell you what they were. Self-portrait with fire ants, Pascal Petit. Self-portrait by Adam Zagajewski. Self-portrait by Robert Creeley, and Sense of Something Coming by Rainer Maria Rilke. I hope I'm pronouncing everyone's names correctly, sorry if not. And I think there might have been a fifth one, but I don't know what that was. So we looked at the self-portrait poems as examples, which were brilliant, and then we had to go back to our portrait drawing and add the things that other people can't see, like scars, tattoos, feelings, objects. And then the exercise was, using the examples in your portrait for inspiration, write a 15-minute self-portrait poem. So that was what we did, and I wrote mine as a free verse poem. I like a bit of free verse, but I have enjoyed exploring the forms and structures in these workshops as well. This poem I went back to and edited a bit, and I felt like I could have carried on editing it, but I read it to a couple of people and they said, stop editing, it's fine, which was quite helpful actually, because you can go on forever. Okay, so it's called Note to Self. There was never a rainbow tattooed on my chest, not even a secret one, hidden in a bra cup. No awkward family reveal, no stepping out victory dance. Just a note slipped into a shoe, folded underfoot and barely considered. I'm still picking my way down the mountain, turning over stones with wary toe cap. Afraid to be witnessed, but the sashaying river calls me on. Now I'm on the river rocks, unlacing sensible shoes.
Oh,
Yeah. Woo.
Thanks.
You do that all the time. You like take us somewhere and we're really in it, and then you go, there it is. Oh, we're here. Honestly, absolutely love it. And yeah, I think you're so right that sometimes we edit, and it's great when people say, just leave it. And I've been so blown away by the fact that sometimes in a 15-minute slot, you guys will produce something that's so beautiful or thoughtful or funny. It's like, what would you do with it? Why would you edit it? And I know we are all about, me and Chris are terrible about the edit, but yeah. Talking of, well, I won't say I was going to say talking funny, but I don't know that you're going to do. So Sue, where's my lovely Sue Allen, who writes a lot of funny poetry, but again, when I see you perform, you do a lot of funny stuff. And then in these workshops, I've seen a completely different side to you, and that is exciting. So
Thank you.
You're there. There she is.
It's all John Humphrey's fault. Everything is John Humphrey's fault. Well, you said I should explore a wider view. I'm glad I did, because I think I've written better stuff from a more serious, less funny, but with some slightly funny lines sometimes. Not feeling that funny at the moment. It's 20 years this month since my son died, and as I think you know, I've been sort of doing a lot about the unspoken and the elephant in the room and exploring all that, and I read this poem as my prose poem last week, I think, but I think it says a lot about the unsaid, so it's not really got a title. I've just called it Isolation, but it needs a better title. I've been writing a lot of prose poetry since we've been in lockdown, and found it an easier way of expressing stuff, sort of in a coherent fashion. So that's why I've chosen to do a prose one. So, isolation. We sit in the eye of our potato couch, each one hollow with regret. We ran out of ideas for potato prints days ago and started carving shapes into the spaces that lay between us. It had to happen eventually, the vivisection of the past, the blade scoring points on the soft underbelly of the half-forgotten elephant, each stroke drawing deeper and deeper lines across the stale grey flesh, the room filling with the stench of accusation. You tried to tempt me out of it, seeking fresher air, but I cannot cross the threshold. Seeing them massing at the gates, I retreat. Taking up my own scalpel, I begin my own dissection. Seeing the elephant spatchcocked before me, I start assessing his age by counting the rings in his heart, the breaths held in his leather lungs, the salt calcified in his tear ducts. I'm getting used to it now, the blood on the carpet. Thank you.
Thank you. You read that last week to us, didn't you? And yeah, it's a cracking poem, Sue Allen.
Thank you, Lauren.
Eloquent as ever. And thanks to John Humphreys for saying you've got whatever he told you to do. Keep doing what John Humphreys told you to do.
Yeah, I believe in John.
Well,
Yeah.
you had all this stuff that was just itching to come out that you were almost trying to sit on.
Yeah.
And I said,
It was an elephant.
let it go. And I'm so glad that you did, because that was superb.
Yeah. Let the elephant go, Sue. Let the elephant go. Alex. Where is Alex, number one? Or are you Alex? No, you are number one. Are you there, Alex?
Right. So for me, the most interesting or most fun thing to discover was in these months was the sonnet. I've read a lot of poetry, but I've never actually written in such a tight form with iambic pentameter and so actually when you gave the homework, I didn't even do it. It just seemed overwhelming. But then once we were in our session, I decided to write, and I decided to just take a free poem I'd written a few days earlier, and it seemed to go into the sonnet form. So that was exciting. But I think the one I'll read for you is actually another portrait. So is that okay? So the same portrait exercise that I think it was Joe described, that was the same exercise, but I put mine into the sonnet form. So here it is. Her hair, alas, did want to heal the birds, but only when she walks away they die. Her brow so longs to search for other worlds, her nose, the north nodes dictates yet to try. She runs away. Her chin she hides from light. Her cheeks to turn the twirl of childhood's tune. She dance the echo throughout time, in sight. In shadow finds the other order's rune. With so much done, there's so much good and right. For happy eyes, her channel, souls commune. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you think it took you to a different place because you wrote it in the form of a sonnet?
Actually, you know what happened? Writing the sonnet, it actually gave a solution that was much happier. So the last two lines of the sonnet are what came turning it into a sonnet. So initially this was also just free, based on the drawing I'd done of myself, really, and then adding some stuff as was suggested. But it actually was pretty dreary. And then when I convert this into a sonnet. The last two lines just kind of came from somewhere. I don't know, from somewhere, maybe from the other side. You know, the rune, the other side with the runes and everything, actually came and said something really positive. You know, everything's right. And so that hadn't been in a freestyle poem, but it happened in the sonnet. So I think that the sonnet did somehow add a happy ending to it.
Oh, cool. That's good. I think that's the thing that we've talked about actually throughout the process with the forms. It has brought a different context, I guess, to what we're writing about. So I found it really useful. I know we've had lots of conversations. I think a lot of us have kicked against the structure of form. So it's been good. It's been quite liberating, actually. Ron, is Ron in the house?
Right. Okay. I wrote, this is from the week when we wrote triolays, and that was a completely new form to me. So I was pleased to see that it was short and not too complicated. I quite like writing short things. I often write very long things, but it's nice to write a short piece sometimes. And what happened was the day I sat down to write it in the afternoon one day, and what had happened earlier that day was somebody had been to see me. It was the first time I'd had a visitor since the lockdown, and we'd all stayed a long way from each other. I talked from the house and they were on the other side of the hedge. This was somebody I hadn't seen for quite a long time because she'd been very busy, and I asked after a mutual friend, somebody that I used to always see at her birthday parties, and it turned out that they died a year ago. And this poem just came out when I came back in the house, really. I just sat down with the triolay format, and this is what came out. So I've called it Triolay for Jim. I asked how someone was today and found he'd died a year ago. Someone I'd liked had slipped away. I asked how someone was today. He was fun and funny, warm and gay. It came as a tremendous blow. I asked how someone was today and found he'd died a year ago. That's it. And it just kind of happened. I didn't really have to think about it too hard. That was just how I was feeling at that moment. And it fitted the form quite coincidentally. So I was quite pleased with that.
I think the repetition really works. I mean, I really enjoyed doing the triolay because it kind of gives weight to what you're trying to say. And I think sometimes when we have conversations, I know my sister Ruth is in the house. Both she and I and our other sister have a terrible habit of repeating. It's almost like we don't believe people have heard what we've said, and we want, what's the word? Confirmation that they've heard, and she's nodding away because we do repeat. And I think it's quite a comforting thing in ordinary dialogue where we come back to those phrases. So what it was, I asked how someone was today. Yeah, I think the form really adds to what you were trying to say, a bit like Margaret's. Because it could be quite a sentimental thing, but it actually was just a moment in time. It's beautiful, really lovely. Thank you. Claire, Madame Stewart.
There I am. Is that me?
Oh, here she is. Claire.
Hello. This poem is about the lockdown, and it's part of the Fibonacci thing, and I did it the number of words per stanza. So sometimes the one I did before was syllables per stanza, but this is words per stanza. And I've started off at 55 and gone down to 1 and then come out again to 55. So it spirals in and then spirals out again. And it's about confinement and being locked down. And I used some I thought about the myths, some myths and fairy tales where people have been locked down. So there's Rapunzel, and there's Penelope, and there's, who's the other one? Someone or other. Someone, you'll guess. Penelope, Rapunzel, and somebody else. Perambulating a local circuit, one piece of exercise, all around the houses. Winding home to the interior merry-go-round, I pirouette towards the spinning wheel that pricks my bubble, sleep in till 11, refuse to listen to the news, the stresses that just wind up. Am I wrong to be enjoying this today? Pulled down sleeve gloves my hand. I land in a flying spin, circling roundabout, twisting my hair. I'd have thought by this time I'd have been yearning for something, or to have loosened screws. Whisked by longing, people headed for the beaches. I drift sleep while the brambles grow, unravel the threads, keep myself imprisoned. My life has a small compass. Inside my home shell, I'm unraveling, too safe. Would like to be spinning out of orbit. Am I stir crazy yet? Spiraling in control, tornado or ammonite, coiled, inert, whirling, I'm uncurling, worming my way, a far too controlled, unspiraling. My life has such a tight, winding tether. I wish I could know how it feels to be free. Protected or imprisoned in Rapunzel's round turret, can I unknot, climb down my own corkscrew hair? People headed for the beaches. Keeping them at social distance, I untangle today's embroidery, spooling the threads up small, rolling surf waves curling under, arms rotating underwater, vortexing down the eddies. I've become unused to the speed of cars. Unfurl my long hair, unstitch my threads, hack at tendriling brambles. Do I really wish I knew how it feels to be free? Can I survive untangled from my small compass? People headed for the edges of the world, the ends of their tethers, then lassoed home, looped back, boomeranged, stuck inside, pirouetting backwards towards paralysis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lots of polite cricket clapping. Our Zoom clapping needs work, I think. I absolutely loved all the curling, twisting, tangled tendrils and all of that language and the whole Rapunzel thing. And then I'm wondering, can you climb down your own hair?
Penelope.
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you.
Sleeping Beauty. Sleeping Beauty was the other one.
What did I say? Yeah, Sleeping Beauty and Rapunzel. Yeah, they were all in there. Penelope, you said, didn't you, Sue?
Penelope. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Undoing the threads.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed doing the form has been a revelation to me. And I think the one I'm going to do for you is not one that is, it's one that I wrote in response to the bird prompt. So the prompt was, there's the Ancient Mariner, there's, oh God, I can't remember now, but there were loads of poems that have been written about birds. And I just said to everyone, right, off you go and write a bird poem. And it was one of those things that has kept me going because I tend to leave my homework to the last minute, and I was thinking, oh shit, I've got to do a poem about a bird. And because we've been doing the homework where we've been looking at structure and form, I ended up really working hard to get it. So I've ended up writing it in couplets because I was trying to tidy it on the page. And I may use, what I've discovered is the bird that popped into my mind was a kingfisher. And there are 3 moments. I've seen a kingfisher twice, and the second time I saw it, I thought was the first time I'd ever seen one. Who knew? And then it was ages later I realised. And it's also a bird my dad used to talk about to me, kingfishers and woodpeckers. So it hasn't got a title, but here we go. In the cutting that morning it came, a flash of colour so fast I couldn't say which. My breath made an oh sound as I exhaled, like a child seeing snowfall at night, or a firework splintering the sky, or a tiny rabbit hesitate on the field, or a shooting star, or blown bubbles floating. It flashed again, came to rest briefly, then gone. I spoke its name, because when you speak a name it makes it true. And this tiny thing gave me hope, a gesture of goodwill, a sign of prosperity that life will take a turn. This darting bright will light up the future from here on. My father spoke of kingfishers, mythical and elusive, a secret we could share if we ever saw one. We never did. Later, I remembered that 3 years before, on the bridge over the Manchester Ship Canal, walking with you, we stopped, turned our backs to the traffic to watch the brown water flow beneath us. Then across the surface shot flame, blue, orange. Your breath made an oh sound as you exhaled. Then it was gone, and we were silent, like we'd witnessed a miracle we'd undo if we spoke. We should have spoken. We never did. Thank you. Thank you all. I mean, feel free to ask questions, or has anyone got anything they want to say about the process, or where they're going to go next, or...
Can I just say thank you, Anne, for hosting these and encouraging us to be our best writing selves. You've been an absolute inspiration, and I really look forward to these sessions every week, and it's without doubt something that's really helped me get through the whole lockdown.
Oh, brilliant.
Oh, thanks, don't you've made me a bit, I mean, back at you, because I feel like it's actually getting it's getting harder, but having something, it's a commitment, isn't it? It's like going to the gym, and it's really helped me. It's like I've got to set the homework. If I set it, I've got to do it, and then I come home from school and meet up with you guys, and then honestly the quality of work, I think we make, it's like playing tennis with, I mean, I can't play tennis, but it's like, I imagine it's like playing tennis with someone who's good at playing tennis. You up your game all the time, so all of you will deliver a little thing that makes me think, oh, okay, I'm going to go back and re-edit it that now. So it's been really good for me, and it's sort of given me a love for form. Who knew? Me and Margaret, the rebels. Don't tell anyone, God. And also thank you. I can see Trevor there, and I can see my sister Ruth and Lizzie and Jane, because it's those peripheral poet lovers as well who make it worth the while to do. So yeah, thank you for coming tonight. I'm going to try and edit this into a cohesive little podcast, and I will send you all the link, and you can all have a look at it. So I'm going to go now. It's lovely to see you all.